Hi, welcome to the Module 1 of the Data Migration Framework course. I am Krupesh Desai, your trainer for this course and the author of the book Data Migration Framework. In this session, we are going to understand the problem of data migration. In the course introduction, I included these three profound questions that changed my life. If you are not aware about my story, I would request you to please view the brief introduction of this course and onboard this training journey from the beginning. Contemplating about these three questions, I realized the dilemma of a project or a program manager who is responsible to lead and manage the challenge of retiring tech debt where data migration is the key part of the puzzle. At the end of this course, you will be able to answer these profound questions for your data migration project using the skills and knowledge obtained in this course. But before we jump on the solution or answers for data migration, let's take a step back and spare some time to understand the unique nature of the data migration, the problem. But before we jump on the solutions or answers for data migration, let's take a step back and spare some time to understand the unique problem of data migration. So, first of all, let's understand why we need to get it right. What is the significance of data migration? The success and failure of data migration directly impacts business continuity and customer experience, which eventually affects the brand and the business. Let's look at the real world case study of data migration gone south to understand its impact with numbers. In July 2015, TSB Bank was acquired by a larger banking group, Banco, for a whopping £1.7 billion. One of the key projects of the deal was to migrate 5 million TSB customers to a new banking system. However, due to data migration failures, along with many other shortcomings, the project turned out to be a great example for what not to do. It created a perfect storm of disruptions for TSB Bank that made huge dent on the reputation and the brand value, and it resulted in significant financial loss for the bank. Look at those numbers. 318 million pounds spent on data migration itself. To do it so wrong that you would need 247 million pounds again to fix technical issues and pay compensations to customers. On top of that, 48 million pounds in fines to regulatory authorities and 81,000 pounds is paid as fine by the former CIO himself. And look at the impact on the people. 1.9 million customers lost access to their accounts. Debit cards and digital banking stopped working. Many suspicious transactions were detected, and in fact, 1,300 people actually lost their money, including their life saving. Imagine that. So, wrong choices made during data migration can prove really costly. Let's look at some other facts and figures about data migration. Although the internet is loaded with best practices and vendor specific data migration guidelines, failures that exceed the time, budget, and the delivery are common phenomena. In 2018, I came across an excellent survey conducted by Dylan Jones of Data Migration Pro. He interviewed a good number of people who are responsible for data migration. And he found out that only 36% of projects were done within the budget and only 46% of the project were delivered within the ideal timeline. So, with data migration, your success ratio is almost 50-50, or I would say 40-60, with 60% probability of a failure. Maybe that's why legacy system would not have been so prevalent today, and retiring them is not at all painless. Let's look at one more recent survey. In 2022, Bridgehead, a healthcare data management solution provider, surveyed a sample of CIOs of various hospitals across the United States. The survey revealed that over 50% of the CIOs were responsible for managing 5 or more legacy applications. And upon investigating the rationale for not retiring legacy system, the first factor was difficulty in finding alternatives. And the second most factor was data migration. Even if they find a good alternative system, they are concerned about how to accurately migrate legacy data. I bet the outcome of a similar survey would be identical in other industries as well, because legacy decommissioning poses reputational and operational risk across the industry vertical. So you wonder what makes data migration so special? Let's look at the unique nature of the larger problem with data migration. Data migration for retiring a legacy system deals with the dilemma of the unknown source and the moving target. Let me explain how. Legacy business systems to be retired are usually operational for more than a decade or two, and less likely to have their first key developers and system matter experts in the team at present. On the other hand, up-to-date documentation about the data structure of the legacy system could be minimal, combined with the organic chaos of upstream and downstream integrations. Thus, you would deal with many unknowns in the legacy system, while the target application is being customized, resulting in changes to the target data structure. So, with the unknown source and the moving target, inadequate planning for data migration can lead to unexpected problems that might cause system to fail, disturb usual business operations, or create costly mistakes in data accuracy. All of these issues can hurt a company's earning, reduce customer satisfaction, and lead to difficulties in meeting legal requirements, as we have seen in the case study in the example. Second, it is a short-lived project or a temporary project, but it is unavoidable. It occurs once in a decade or two because you don't change multi-million dollar systems every year. And because of that, mistakes and ignorance during data migration can introduce long-term issues. It will create inefficiencies in your data integrations, data reporting, and executing business processes as well. If you import junk from your previous system, it will make your new system junk as well, and it will negatively affect the ROI of the new system. Mistakes are likely in data migration because it needs input from multiple stakeholders spanning across various business units in an organization. Data migration demands executive decision making about archiving unnecessary legacy data, identifying the necessary legacy data for migration, mapping source and the target data structures, and those decisions must be backed by a clear ownership and a sign-off by the stakeholders. Decision and choices made during data migration has long-lasting impact. Thus, it must be based on facts, figures, and informed decision making. I acknowledge that any project failure is the failure of the people, not technology. If the technology is not good enough, it is the failure of people behind the decision to bring that technology in the first place. Similarly, if data migration causes significant delays and issues in retiring legacy tech debt, is a failure of people making ill-informed, misinformed, uninformed decisions about legacy data migration, consciously or unconsciously. So now that we know the nature of data migration, how exactly you can prevent yourself from the common pitfalls of data migration and deliver a successful solution. What is that solution? Dare I say, it is my framework, Desai Data Migration Framework, I would like to call it. The framework is the combined outcome of my experience with 4 migrations in last 10 years and 3 years of active research for my book. In my research, I came across many best practices documents, gone through a fair amount of academic and commercial literature made public in the last 2 decades. I have almost 40 references in my book to other books, chapters, published papers, and articles. During my research, I realized that there's a need for a vendor agnostic and a simple framework that facilitates informed decision making for data migration. Therefore, I packed all my learnings into a framework that can be applied across different industries and scenarios. And it covers all aspects of data migration that begins from the discovery phase when the target system is not even decided to running the test migrations and finally executing the cutover. So before we jump into the framework, let's have a quick look at what is a framework and why we need one. A framework is a structured and systematic approach or a guide designed to help organize, analyze, and solve a specific type of a problem. Framework provides a set of principles, concepts, or components that work together to address complex challenges logically and consistent. Simply put, a framework is like a blueprint or a toolkit that simplifies complex tasks by breaking them down into organized, manageable, and repeatable steps. So now that you know about framework, let's look at my framework for data migration. Here is my framework with 10 components, and it is explained in depth in this course. I hope it will empower good decision making by providing a structured approach to analyze, evaluate, and execute actions for data migration. From the first look, it is obvious that the framework includes 3 major blocks, that is, foundation, iteration, and migration. I would call them different phases a data migration project would go through. The framework identifies 3 foundational components: the migration scope, data segments, and people and technology that further facilitate iterative process for well-defined test runs shown in the iteration block with 4 components, that is, business rules, data quality, data integrations, and iteration goals. After getting the foundation and iteration right, you move to the last phase of the project, that is migration, which includes 3 components: testing strategy, go live, and post migration. These 10 components together ensure a smooth and robust data migration on the cutover day. The foundation phase is really critical as it involves the initial steps needed to align stakeholders and define the scope of migration project. This foundational work should ensure that every stakeholder is on the same page, and it should lay down the groundwork for a successful transition. These 3 foundational components are not sequential. In fact, they complement each other. Following the foundation, the iteration phase emphasizes the importance of testing and validating the migration process. During this stage, various scenarios are explored to ensure the migration works as intended before the final implementation occurs. And finally, the migration phase marks the transition where the system is migrated to a new environment and the old system is decommissioned, completing the overall migration process. Each phase plays a vital role in ensuring smooth and successful data migration. The framework gives you a guideline to follow in order to execute data migration successfully. However, the data migration plan is the document you need to communicate, review, and validate your actions and choices for the data migration. You can see data migration plan as the proactive artifact containing a set of informed decisions individuals and organizations make to move from point A to point B with minimized risk. The plan will be shared with all concerned stakeholders for their endorsement and sign off on the choices made for the migration. The core reason for making a plan for data migration is same as making a plan for your holiday, which is the assurance of a good experience and conscious avoidance of unpleasant surprises while doing the actual activity, which is migration or a holiday. While drafting a plan based on the proposed framework, one could anticipate possible risk and challenging situations beforehand. This proactive measure onboards potential stakeholders from various business units and systems which are to be impacted by the change. I gained the first-hand experience creating and executing a data migration plan as a data migration lead in the public healthcare sector. After the successful plan-based data migration project, I worked as an external data migration consultant, introduced late in two similar projects of retiring legacy system in the health sector. Therefore, I was fortunate to witness the chaos and delays in the legacy data migration project that commenced without any plan. The data migration plan sets the foundation for well-informed and timely decision making, leading to a coherent solution approach with no surprises on the time and cost with the project progression. A legacy data migration attempt without a plan makes decision on an ad hoc basis on similar items otherwise covered systematically in a planned migration. Therefore, the unplanned approach could face limited time and budget flexibility constraint, leading to chaos, stress, and reputational risk for the executive and the organization. The data migration plan is a living document subject to additional information during the project progression. You cannot expect the entire plan to be ready with all 10 components as a prerequisite for commencing data migration activities, such as data discovery and developing data transformation logic for data migration. Remember that do not write a single piece of code or buy any expensive software before you have the first approved version of the data migration plan. Along with the framework, you must consider the data migration plan as your strategic tool for delivering successful data migration. Data migration 1.0 must include choices available and decision made about the first three foundational components of the framework. The first version of the plan should also include a high-level summary of the remaining 7 components, which is to be evolved during the project progression. Data Migration 1.0 is a strategic document for stakeholders to review and endorse. Start with the first 3 components during the discovery stage of the project and add or amend the remaining 7 components in the plan with business rules and decision made with the project progression. Multiple templates for data migration plan are one Google search away. However, I found them overwhelming as one of document covering all the facets of data migration before the project initiation. I can recall my own struggle in early days in drafting data migration plan using ready-made templates that were not directly applicable to my project. We looked in the previous slide the data migration workstream deals with an unknown source and a moving target. Therefore, a lot of things will evolve during the project progression. New data quality issues will emerge, gaps in mapping will surface that needs further business rule, a new risk can be identified which need mitigation. We looked in the previous slide that data migration workstream deals with an unknown source and a moving target. Therefore, a lot of things will evolve during the project progression. New data quality issues will emerge, gaps in the mapping will surface. In fact, compliance related risks can be identified, which then needs mitigation. These decisions and choices to mitigate risk are subject to documentation in a regulatory sensitive environment. Therefore, your plan must be flexible to adopt new changes and include new decisions made along the way. As the key outcome of the discovery phase, the first version of the plan sets the foundation for the very first data migration test run. As the project progresses, decisions are made in the remaining component, each decision a valuable contribution towards decommissioning, which should be documented and agreed upon. And eventually, the final version of the plan, which all stakeholders must endorse before the retirement of the legacy system, serves as the organizational knowledge base. It provides retrospective information about how the business data were migrated from the legacy system, underscoring the strategic value of the data migration plan as more than just a courtesy document. Well, congratulations, you have made this far. Now that you are better informed about the problem of data migration, along with the introduction of the data migration framework and the significance of having a data migration plan, let's look at the framework in depth in the next module. Thank you. Please continue on the next video, which is the beginning of the module 2, that is the foundation.